Hi, everyone. William's going to introduce me.
All right, everyone. Thank you for coming and for joining us this afternoon. This is our third Digital Cafe of fall 2025. Today, we're very happy to have uh, Fanita Henderson joining us today. Fanita Henderson is assistant professor in the psychology and counseling department. She joined New York Tech a couple of years ago, 2024, from SUNY Old Westbury. She's also a licensed medical health professional. And she's going to be telling us today about a mindful approach to racial discourse. So we're very excited to hear her talk. So thank you all, and we'll thank you, Fanita.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm just going to share my PowerPoint with you. Can you let me share?
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Great. Need help?
Yeah, I'd like to share
On screens.
this
That
document.
one.
Okay.
Try that.
There we go. And let me just do it from the start.
So go down to presenter mode. And we should hopefully all see your presenting screen.
Okay. So I'm a little technologically challenged, so.
No, that's okay. So we're seeing, unfortunately, we're seeing your.
You're seeing my notes?
Your version of the.
Okay.
We can.
That's okay, and I have notes as well.
Yeah, well, okay. Everyone, thank you for your patience as we get everything set up. Okay.
All right. So thank you everyone for coming. And this is called the mindful approach to racial discourse and for mental health professionals. And so really it's talking about promoting empathy and understanding in clinical conversations. And so mentors work with people with diverse racial and cultural backgrounds, many of whom face unique challenges that impact mental health. Conversations about race are essential for culturally responsive care, but they can be emotionally intense and complex. So mindfulness offers a practical way to navigate these discussions by fostering present moment awareness and non-judgmental attention. This study, guided by constructivist grounded theory, explores how mindfulness shapes racial discourse among mental health professionals. And when I did this study, three key constructs emerged, which we will be looking at. So this study is important because of the racism is a growing public health crisis that affects all aspects of life. And racial discourse in therapeutic settings is vital due to rising racial and cultural diversity and the pervasive impact of racism. It positions mindfulness as a practical approach for clinicians to develop the emotional and cultural competence needed to navigate these complex systems. So as I researched some of the obstacles to effective racial discourse, I found that systemic racism deeply affects Black Americans across physical, psychological, and societal domains, creating disparate healthcare, in education, employment, housing, and the criminal justice system. It underscores the psychological toll of racism and the urgent need for mental health professionals to engage in open, empathetic conversations about race to foster healing and change. So the purpose of grounded theory study is to explain how mindfulness influenced racial discourse among mental health professionals. Just feel like oh yeah, I did. Okay. So I just skipped a slide. Sorry about that. Okay. So mindfulness proves promising in fostering meaningful racial discourse. So the of mindfulness is paying attention intentionally and non-judgmentally to the present moment. This means being fully aware of what is happening right now without labeling it as good or bad. And the ultimate aim of mindfulness is to reduce suffering, and both for ourselves and for others. And in the context of racial discourse, this goal aligns with reducing the emotional pain that's caused by racism. Processes that make mindfulness work. Some of the processes that have been indicated in research, one is attention regulation. So staying focused on the present conversation rather than past experiences or future worries. Present moment is another mechanism. So being grounded in the here and now, which helps prevent reactive responses, and non-judgmental acceptance, observing thoughts and emotions without criticism, which reduces defensiveness. Now we can go to the purpose. So the purpose of this grounded theory study is to explain how mindfulness influences racial discourse among mental health professionals. And this research is situated within the context of recent socio-political and public health events. When I started this research, it was after the murder of George Floyd and the COVID-19 pandemic, both of which have amplified racial tensions and highlighted systemic inequalities. These events have underscored the urgent need for mental health professionals to engage in culturally responsive and emotionally intelligent conversations about race. And so my research question was, how does using mindfulness influence racial discourse? So in other words, if we integrated mindfulness in these discussions about race, what can be an expected outcome? All right, and the kind of research paradigm that I used was qualitative research. And qualitative study uses an epistemological framework. And that's just a set of questions and principles that guide how we create, validate, and use knowledge. With this qualitative study, the reality is subjective, and the researcher is an instrument in the study. So I use myself as part of the studies as I interview my subjects. This study employed constructivist grounded theory to explain how mental health professionals use mindfulness to influence racial discourse. So with constructivist grounded theory, the theory is grounded in the data, and you'll see how I was able to get a theory to emerge. So the data collection steps that I used purposive sampling, and that's just chose the participants who could best answer my research question. So it wasn't a random sample. The participants were 9 licensed mental health professionals from different regions of the country who engage regularly in mindfulness practice and have experience discussing race with their clients. I recruited the participants by emailing a recruitment letter and flyer to mental health listservs and professional counseling organizations. And the recruitment letter included information about the research goal and participants' role in the data collection process. And then I obtained permission from the appropriate IRB, and then I created a semi-structured interview to ask questions and collect data from the participants. And there goes my participant demographics. I had 9 licensed mental health professionals participated in the study. The mental health professionals range from in their 20s to over 56. Their gender included 5 women, 3 men, and 1 identified trans queer. The participants by license were 2 licensed clinical social workers, 1 licensed psychologist, and 6 licensed professional counselors. By ethnicity or race, there were 5 Black or African American, 1 white, 1 biracial, 1 Indian, and 1 Latina.
Question?
Yes.
Did you actually get everyone all together in one place?
No. This is just they're confidential. And so the data analysis procedures I used was Sharma's constructivist grounded theory methodology. And the results were an emergent theory, research findings, and implications. So the emergent theory that I came up with was integrating mindfulness with racial discourse is an evolving process that happens both personally and professionally across both time and experience, and it includes 3 primary constructs: identifying and managing social processes, conditions for personal and professional growth, and using skillful strategies. So this emergent theory explains that integrating mindfulness with excuse me, racial discourse is not a one-time event. It's an evolving process. And this process unfolds personally and professionally, and it's shaped by both time and experience. The theory includes 3 primary constructs. And here they are: identifying and managing social processes, personal and professional growth, and mindfulness strategies for racial discourse. So these constructs represent the core themes derived from the participants' narratives and reflect how mindfulness influences racial discourse in clinical settings. These constructs are not isolated, they interact dynamically. Mental health professionals engage in racial discourse and skill. The category of identifying and managing social processes explains people continually adapt to their environments through interactions, as well as how they experience and regulate those interactions. Mindfulness helps identify social issues like racism, implicit bias, and inequity influencing racial discourse. Participants used mindfulness to manage intense emotions such as shame, fear, and embarrassment during racial conversations, And mindfulness fosters self-care, teaching, and modeling to promote compassionate racial discourse and social change. See this box here, identifying and managing social processes. In that box is all of the data that was collected from the 9 participants, right, that would fall under that theoretical code. But it started with initial codes. So it started with fracturing the data, going line by line, coding, and coming up with a set of initial codes. And then from there, I took the initial codes and I clustered them together to form what's known as focus codes. And what focus codes do is it raises the analytical power and it helps me to get through the data more quickly now that I have a focus code. For instance, one of the for identifying and managing social processes was identifying social concepts. And another focus code was experiencing isms. So looking at experiencing racism, implicit, explicit bias. Okay, the next box we're going to go to is personal and professional growth. That's another theoretical code. And in there was consistent mindfulness practice that increased self-awareness and empathy in professional interactions. So throughout the data, I could see that the participants that I chose had a consistent mindfulness practice, and they went to trainings and they learned more. So they immersed themselves. And in that way, that helped them to grow personally and professionally. Mindfulness helps professionals engage in racial discourse with greater sensitivity and effectiveness, and there was transformative growth. Mindfulness fosters continuous personal and professional development to address racial issues effectively. So the participants would describe pivotal moments or pivotal relationships that help them to grow in this area. Okay, the last one is mindfulness strategies. And in that one, we looked at strategies that the participants talked about, like embracing difficult emotions, pausing, grounding, being curious about the emotion. Decentering can allow individuals to have mental distance from their problematic thoughts and emotions, allowing an opportunity to observe their habitual tendency to automatically react. Right? So this observation can further offer a sense of choice to respond consciously instead of reacting unconsciously. And so I just wanted to show you some samples of the data that help to put the theory together. So this is just one quote from one of the participants. And this participant was Nazir. And this quote went under identifying and managing social processes. And he says, when I am using my mindfulness, I'm trying to not necessarily react based on what's coming up, based on my implicit biases, based on all my conditioning that has happened throughout my life. What I know about this race, this person of a different race, or even of the same race. So basically bringing presence into the moment and then dropping all the preconceived notions, all the biases, everything else that's coming up, and accepting the person and the situation just as it is. So under personal and professional growth, again, there was consistent mindfulness practice, which increased self-awareness and empathy in professional interactions. And then mindfulness helped the professionals engage in racial discourse with greater sensitivity and effectiveness. And then there was that transformative growth. And so then there was another example under using mindful strategies. One of the focus codes was embracing difficult emotions. And this particular quote, I used the person's saying, "My triggers are my treasures." There was, because it was a saying, there wasn't really any other patterns to go with, right? Because the person had their own individual saying, but the saying was significant enough to look for that particular code, embracing difficult emotions, right? So under my triggers are my treasures, the participant stated, the things that scare me about the world, the things when I notice my own racist thoughts coming up and being able to sit with them and not wanting to sweep them away and notice them and stay with them and wanting to transcend them, I guess, by being in that quiet place or wanting to open up to a place wider than that fear or that anger or that frustration or whatever it is, staying aware with what makes you uncomfortable. So that's a mindfulness strategy. Brace in emotions helps you to stay in the conversation and not shut down. So findings of the emergent theory, using mindfulness during racial discourse helps identify and manage social processes that interfere with constructive racial dialogue. And using mindfulness during racial discourse can increase self-awareness and one's privileges and oppressions. And using skillful strategies such as embracing difficult emotions help foster meaningful racial dialogue. Okay, so just to let you know, this is the condensed version. It was like a 180-page dissertation, so I'm trying to boil it down into and not make it, too boring when you're getting too much information. But just to close, mindfulness can be used to identify social dynamics that obstruct racial discourse. When practitioners use mindful techniques, they experience increased self-awareness and awareness of others. This self-awareness helps people to see their biases and the socialization to colorblindness. When one replaces colorblindness with mindfulness, one acknowledges privilege and hierarchy. One can now see that the other person is in pain and can choose to feel compassion and take action to diminish the pain. And so some of the implications for mental health professionals, they can use mindfulness to regulate difficult emotions, be aware of implicit biases, increase self and other awareness, which is really important for that mental health professional, and become a culturally responsive mental health practitioner. I think the other thing that was not said in the data, but was implicit, was that those who were able to practice mindfulness and engaged in racial discourse felt more multiculturally competent, right? They felt like they could handle and work with people from other cultures. And I think that's it. So let me question and answers.
All right, so thanks so much, Fanita. That was great. Do we have any questions from online?
Yes, Amanda.
Hi, I'm Amanda. We haven't met before. I'm in English on the Long Island campus, and I was wondering how you came to approach this project. What inspired you to take it on?
Excellent question. So while I was getting my PhD in 2020, two significant events occurred. One was the murder of George Floyd, which I found vicariously traumatizing. And the other one was the pandemic, right? And I found it, and as I interviewed some of my other colleagues, I found it difficult to operate. Like I felt a lot of fear, anger. I couldn't watch television. I refused to see George Floyd get murdered on television. I think to this day, I've never seen that video, but I could hear it. You know, you can hear people talking about it, you can hear it in the news. So all these things were impacting me and affecting me in a negative way. I had a really hard time getting through that semester. And then the following semester, a course was offered at my school called Mindful CBT, Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. And once I took that, it just made such a difference in my life. So the very thing happened. I began immersing myself in it. I began finding groups that do do mindfulness meditation, and I began reading. And I now run a mindful meditation group 6 a.m. on Wednesdays. So since 2020 to now, I've consistently used it because it had such a profound effect in getting me out of that hole. And so I wanted to know how, how it would fare with working with racial discourse. So that's how I got to it. Thank you for asking.
Hi, hi, Professor. I've got a question as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for your time. Hi. I was just curious if through your robust research, if there was anything that maybe surprised you as you were learning, that, or maybe something that was a takeaway that you weren't expecting. I'd love to know.
Yes. So something that surprised was the as people talked about racism, the topic of colorism came up. And now people were experiencing colorism within their own family. And that was, I guess, shocking to me. And I don't know why, because I think it happens in my in my family as well, but just not really being able to see it until the conversation came up. The other thing that shocked me is I mentioned in the presentation that the researcher is an instrument or tool, and how people really used me as that instrument. You know, they would say, I wonder if because of skin tone, you think of me as my mother thinks of me. Like, and of course I didn't have any words for that. I didn't say anything. I just let the person, but those are like notes that I carried at how profoundly colorism was affecting people.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Fanita.
Hi.
How has this impacted your teaching?
Yes, well, as Jack knows,
Mhm.
every class I start off with 5 minutes of mindfulness. And I find that's to help, we're on Zoom, so just to help people get present and come into the room, right? And also it helps me bring up, especially with mental health counseling, it helps me bring up discussions about race. We have practices, we give examples, and I think people feel open to share. I think another implication of this, which is a mindful approach to racial discourse, is that it goes beyond race, right? So I think I find that it touches diversity in general. So whether it's gender, sexual orientation, ability, culture, whatever, it seems to have an effect. But to me, the thing would be to, in order to further it, is to actually be able to measure it, right? What effect is mindfulness having in discussions about race with your clients or with your students, or yes.
So is that something, like, is that another project you're thinking about? 'Cause I know a lot of this was your dissertation.
Yes, 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 yes. There's a lot of projects in there. Anyone else like to ask a question?
So I was kind of just interested on this aspect of it. Mindfulness is something that as mental health professionals would primarily talk about with their patients, I guess. How do you feel about this? This study seemed kind of the opposite of how the practitioners would change their behavior. So any like thoughts on that reversal, I guess?
Yeah, I think the point I think that presentation or the study is making, or one of the points, is that it helps practitioners be more multicultural, more multiculturally competent, and it helps them to be able to engage with their clients in a more authentic way. So a lot of times unconsciously we stay away from, conversations with our clients, and these things are impacting them, but we feel safe. We don't talk about it, like we might not want to talk about herpes or an STD with our client, or, race. So those are just things to encourage our clients, our students, to bring their whole self in as they learn, as they heal.
Yeah, thank you. So did they talk at all, say, about their conversations with their subjects, with their patients about a race, or
Yes, yes.
so it wasn't just they were thinking about their own behavior, but they were also
Right.
having these difficult conversations with their
Right. And so that was one of the criteria, right? So that's purposive sampling. So I wanted people that had these conversations with their clients and that practice mindfulness on a regular basis, in order for the data to be rich enough to support a theory.
Yeah, great.
Mhm. Thank you for the question,
Yeah, no,
William.
great. And yeah, anyone else online? I do have one more. This is about the methodology, actually. So do you let's see. How does the coding work? So do you collect their responses and group them into different categories
Right.
based on their responses? Do you have an automatic way of doing that? Do you have like a it
Mhm.
almost sounds like a test that an AI thing would do, maybe.
Right. So at this time, AI wasn't that popular. when believe it or not, in October 2023, like it is now, you could just pull it out of a hat, right? So there was software that I was using for the coding. And within a few months and meeting with my chair, I said, like I'm using the software. And he said, I would do it all by hand. He said, it's too nuanced. Like the software is not going to pick it up. And that's why I was having such a hard time, because things like your triggers or your treasures, or in order to do this, to engage in racial discourse, I had another participant say you need a hard back, but a soft front. Like, what do those things mean to AI or to, and so once I went by hand, then things began to change. But it's a lot of work, right? Because we're talking about semi-structured interviews that were at least 60 minutes long, and then looking at the lines line by line, coding, trying to find words that are going to, so it was a lot of work. Ways very gratifying when something would emerge. I would go, oh, look at that. There's a focus code. Okay, let's see if I can find this in the rest. And grounded theory is very iterative and comparative. So once I find a focus code, I need to go back to the other data that I already looked at and see where I can find that focus code now in this data, right?
I think that's a great approach. I mean, I teach statistics. The first one of the things I always tell is, there's no substitute for looking at the data.
Right.
You can analyze it as many times as you want, but until you go into it yourself, you're not going to find any new conclusions or come up with any new hypotheses. So that's great that you're by hand.
Yeah.
Right.
Any other questions?
Okay, well,
I would say one more thing. I would say the other thing I would probably want to do, Maria, is maybe a mixed methods, right? So using assessment tools, doing the qualitative research, but also using a quantitative piece, bringing someone else maybe to do that part, and see where that takes the research.
okay. Well, great. Well, let's thank our speaker, Fanita, one more time. Thank you. Thank you all for all coming. All of you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Great. So our next event, I believe, is next month. We'll be hearing from Hui Lee from the mathematics department. We'll hear. He'll tell us a little bit more what he's doing then. So we'll look out for some new announcements. I'll also look online for some for recordings of the recent talks. And great. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Fanita.
Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much. Thank you. See you
Bye.
soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.